My name's Rhianydd Webb of Dragons and Daffodils Cakes in Pontypridd in South Wales, and welcome to Woodland and Whimsical Cake Art. So this season I'm going to be making Fryn's Cwtch. So that is a gorgeous little woodland and whimsically shelter which little Fryn is going to live in. Now around the shelter you need plant life, so that was what we did in episode 1. We made ferns, we made oak leaves and we made grass. So now in episode 2 we're going to be furnishing the Cwtch, because no self-respecting shelter is going to have no furniture. So join me and we will start making some cute little mushrooms and stones. So as you can see, I've started the mushrooms. I'm making the mushroom in 3 pieces actually. So the inside piece is going to be where the gills are, and they're quite white and there's lots of texture on them. And I'm actually going to add the cap when this piece is dry and wrap it around. I've also got here 2 methods of doing the centres, the actual stems or the stalks. One is wired or cocktail stick, you could do it with wire as well, and one is absolutely edible, so it's all just flour paste. But if you do it this method for going into cakes and you do this method, can go onto the board, and it just gives you more options then. But if there's any risk of anybody eating it, like it's going to a small child, always do the unwired version. Now these are pretty small. As you can see, I've got about 1 gram of paste. So I'm going to thin it out. This one's going to be ever so slightly smaller than the other one, because I want to make 4 mushrooms for this particular piece. So I'm just going to move this to one side. Now, by using Squire's kitchen flour paste, it's quite a quick drying paste. There's lots of amazing flour pastes out there, but they all dry at different speeds. So what I'm going to do is use this one because it's a very hot day and it's going to dry quickly. So we're going to, I'll just hold it there gently. We're going to use an angled tweezers, and I'm going to pinch all the way around this piece. And you can go in there with a scalpel afterwards and add extra lines. But I'm just going to show you the quick way that I find. And by having this piece extra, it stops you squashing it when you make the top of the mushroom. And if you look at some of them, they got a long and a short. So it's just like needlework, like embroidery. There we are. So this is like a long and short stitch. But that's a really simple way of doing it, isn't it? Now, if you've got some that have gone a bit wonky, you can get in there with a tool and you can separate them out again. So if you accidentally leaned on a piece, don't be afraid to get in there and separate it. If you need to lift it up off the table, make sure you use a palette knife. And the other thing you can do, see this one here is really rather chunky. I'm going to cut him in half, and I'm going to give him a little bit of a wiggle side to side to separate it out. So if every now and again you grabbed a bit too much paste in that tweezers, like I've done with this one, there we go. And all my scrubbing of my fingernails hasn't got away the brown snail colouring, because we were doing snails this morning, which was a lovely morning, but everything is now brown. Now, what you're also going to need to do is you're just going to have an area for this to sit into. So I'm going to use a ball tool of some description. It doesn't matter what brand you're using, but because I'm using this hard flour paste, because I'm not even covering it up when I'm waiting for anything, I'm leaving it on the work surface so that it's drying. And that means I need a firm, solid metal tool. And that's just going to help me get that hollow, because what will happen is that will just sit in there quite nicely. See, that'll form into there. You're going to have to fix them together, but it's quite nice not to have to worry too much about getting that hole back in. So to do the stalks themselves, I'm going to fix a piece onto a cocktail stick just to show you this method. And all you're going to do if you're going to do an unwired one is you just roll it into a sausage shape. Taper the bottom a little bit, just a little bit, so that when it goes into the ground, it's got some detail and some interest. And then you're going to grab that scalpel and you're going to really push into it here and there. Because when you look at these little fairy mushrooms, they're the ones that always have the little, they seem to grow after just being quite damp, warm and then damp. And they leave little circles in the grass. But they've got these gorgeous battered, slightly battered stems at the bottom. I think that's why I quite like them, because they're not perfect. So you can cut into it with your scalpel, and if a bit comes off, like that bit there, it's absolutely fine. Doesn't matter. But once you've pulled up, make sure you pull back down so it looks like it belongs and it's not going backwards. And as I said, you can make them with the bottom bit without a cocktail stick, and this can be push a hole in the cake's icing and push it in. So it's a completely edible form. So I'm going to go ahead and make 4 of those now, but we're going to come back in a second and we're going to do the cap. So as you can see, I've gone ahead and turned some of them into the mushrooms already, from the unwired version right through to the wired version. So I'm going to show you how to put the caps on. Let's move those very carefully out of the way. As you can see, I'm drying them on a flower pad so that they won't add any more dents that I don't want. I have taken some of the white flour paste and I've added 8 grams to all of the paste. So altogether I add 18 grams of white and I've got 8 grams of brown, but I'm not using the brown until I've done all of my fin sections and all of my stalks. So this has just gone to the caps, and I'm using the Fractal Colours brown to add in. Now what you need to do, you won't quite use all the paste. You want to gauge how big you want this to be. So I'm rolling a ball roughly the same size as that actual fin section, because it's going to get stretched out. There we go. So I'll just go ahead and weigh this ball for you, for example, just so you can see the size. This particular ball is 3.8 grams, but you can see if you just flatten a ball gently, it needs to be roughly the size. And this is all done with hands, no special tools needed for this. So I'm just pinching out, literally pinching out, and the hollow I create and the shape I create is up to me from there. Now I've seen some really cool ones where they've got like a dent on the top, and I've seen others that come right up into a cap shape or a dome. So on the top already, they're quite domed. At the bottom, I've got some cap shapes. Just noticed one of my mushrooms has moved because I picked it up. I'm just going to lie it down. So you want to double check that that fin fits inside. See, it's just about perfect actually. So I'm actually going to push that in there. But first of all, I'm just going to put a little bit of edible glue, wipe the excess off and only glue the center. You don't need to glue anywhere else. So we're going to push it into one side and into the opposite. And because this is now quite firm, give that a wiggle back in. Because this is quite firm, it doesn't matter if I press it, I'm not going to damage those gills that I've already done. Some people call them fins, but I do believe that it's the gills is the correct term. There's probably some skilled botanist out there that knows, so you can comment in the break or in the comments below. There, see, so that gives a really nice texture on there. The cap of the mushroom looks a really little bit boring there. So I'm going to grab a roundish tool and I'm using both the sides and the top. I'm not thinking where I'm pressing at all. I'm just putting lots of marks because I'm then going to smooth it slightly. And because this is flour paste and not Saracino, it's going to lose some of the marks. Some of them will disappear. I'm also going to put a little slit here and there. And I'm going to split the side of the cap because you see that, don't you? They're never perfect around the bottom. Some of them look really beautifully battered underneath. And when we dust later on in the show, we'll be able to get some colour into there. So once I've done that, I can just give it a bit of a push with my hands again. Now I need to put the center back in. So do you remember we used, where was it? We used the red one. Do you remember we used that ball tool into the center? You just want to check the hole is still there because you don't want to be pushing too hard with an edible stalk because they can't press. Now what I do sometimes is I push, put glue first and then push. And what that does, the tool will spread the glue around all the sides of the hole I've created, not just on the top. And you want to leave that overnight ideally, but if you've got a dehydrator, it would just be about 10 minutes in there. So there we go, there's our mushrooms. So we're going to come back in a second and then we're going to be making the stones. So let's make some simple pebbles or stones for the garden. I'm going to do this quite quickly. Now I've got some black gel colours. It's the Fractal Colours Full Fill Gel. And I'm going to start that first, but what I'm also going to do is put a couple of patches of brown, because what I find a lot of people do is just make pebbles of one colour or another. I'm going to squeeze it in on the inside. Apologies if the table will wobble slightly while I'm doing this. And then what you would do would be roll into a sausage and into an S shape and back into a sausage, same as we did last episode really. And it's a good way of getting that paste, can you see if I've broken it over there, that paste to marble along. So rather than just letting it burst through the sides, it's colouring from the inside out. Very slippery and hot in here today, so I'm just going to have to do this in my hands because it's sliding off the table. Can you see? Just starting to come through. Keep on going. And when you can see it's as stripy as you want it to be, that's when I need it a bit more casually. But I don't need all of the paste. I just pull off one piece at a time and knead it, because otherwise I find that I lose all of my nice marbling. Now you can use sugar paste, you can use sugar paste with CMC, you can use your flour paste, you can use Saracino. So this is completely up to you. So I'm going to pull off a piece, and you're going to make as many of these as you want. Roll it into a rough ball, and then I'm going to grab some foil, and instead of squeezing it with my fingers, I'm squeezing it with the foil. You could use a nail brush to get a bit of texture on there as well. And I'm just going to go ahead and make a good few little stones of all shapes and sizes. But that foil just gives it a bit of a squeeze and stops it looking too neat. And I'm also grabbing the stones from different sections of the marbled pieces, and I'm pressing some, pushing others, and others I'm just going to give a squeeze afterwards if I feel they're a bit too dented for me. Can you see that nice light bit? Let's pinch a bit from there. I'm going to make some fairly big ones first, because don't forget everything is slightly smaller or slightly bigger to Fryn and smaller to us. So just getting some rough shapes. Then you can do some really little ones, varying sizes, and these are just to scatter. So there's no actual purpose to these. It's just adds to the depth of your piece, doesn't it? If it all starts to look a bit too samey, look for a different patch in your paste and pull off different patches. Oh, I quite like that. See that stripe in there? I'm actually not going to roll it. I'm going to push it into place so that stripe remains. And then I'll open and close my foil just to get as much or as little texture as I want, really. I don't want too much texture, but if it's flat, when we add a little bit of dust later on in the episode, it's going to look flat. So we want some texture. So there we are. You can go ahead and make loads of those. So that's our mushrooms and our stones made. I'll show you how to dust them later on in the episode. So now let's go and take a break, and after that I'll be showing you how to make a lovely leafy oak rug. Hello, my name's Rhianydd Webb of Dragons and Daffodils Cakes. Last year, I celebrated my 20th year in business by writing Cyril's Cake Adventure. So join me for the next 6 sessions for Woodland and Whimsical Cake Art. Welcome back to part 2. Now Fryn's shelter is going to have a lovely grass floor, so let's go and make an oak leaf rug to go in the centre. So I've used my rolling pin to roll out some of the flour paste. Now this is the Squire's Kitchen again. The reason I'm sticking to the flour paste at the moment is because I want these things to be nice and thin. You can use your fractal colours to colour it up again. I've used the same as previously. I've used the Fulfill gels, and I've used Vivid Green and Grass Green. So I've got the smallest oak leaf cutter I've got, as opposed to the really tiny miniature ones. And the reason for that is because I want this to look like it's he's picked it before the trees have got any bigger. So I'm going to be cutting out a selection of these, and you want to be giving it a good old rub with your finger. Can you see those little bits that come off the edges? That means it wasn't clean enough, the cut. Now you can tap it out, but it's a sticky day today, so I'm going to go ahead and use the paintbrush push method. So I'm just going to grab a nicely sized brush there. There we are, that's a thin handle. So you keep stretching your paste back out, give it a really good wiggle side to side and a rub to get the excess. Plastic cutters, they cut lovely when they're brand new, but my cutters have been used a lot. So their edges are not quite as sharp as they need to be. Because I don't need the cornflower, I'm just going to move that out of the way. So just cutting away, rub and do that. So I'll just go and carry on and then we'll come back. So I've cut out all of my leaves now, and I've also gone ahead and veined them. So this as you can see, this leaf cut is only about 3 centimeters tall. It's by Orchard Products, but you use whichever one you've got really. Now the leaf veiner I've got is actually too big, but it's the smallest one I own. So what I'm going to do, don't forget when we need to vein our leaf, we turn the leaf over from the direction that we cut it so it's flatter on the back, and the back of the cutout shape becomes the front because it's flatter. So I'm putting it into the inverted side, and I'm going to press down really firmly because this is quite a soft veiner. This is by Sugar City, but it's pretty. But can you see I've laid my small leaf at the top of the veiner rather than at the bottom, so the veins will be more appropriate for the shape of that leaf. So we're now going to assemble this rug. Now I've got to do this while the leaves are all damp. Now you can choose whether you use the back of the vein or the front of the vein, or a mixture of both. But the way I think it would be nice to do would be to try and make a sort of circular rug, or you can make a rectangular. Now I drew a rectangular when I originally started doing this, but I suddenly thought to myself, why have we got to have a rectangular rug? Can't we have a nice circular rug? And don't forget, this is not a big thing we're doing. We're mostly working in miniature here. So if Fryn's Cwtch is going to be, the actual house itself is going to be 25 centimetres by 15 centimetres. So the width is the longest. So we haven't actually got a lot of space inside that hut. And I want the rug to be in the middle of the floor. So it can be slightly bigger than you see in here. So you can always add another layer underneath, which is what I'd like to do, ideally. So I'm just going to record this and we'll carry on fast forward just so you can see what I'm doing. So as you can see, I'm going to cut out some more leaves. So I'll just carry on doing that and then I shall show you the finished result. So here's everything I've made so far. I quite like the mat the right way up as I planned. Now the veins you can't see there because they're very, very faint. But if you look at oak leaves, their veins aren't very strong, but you might like the back a little bit. There is some glue residue, but as we're probably going to be painting this, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to leave it dry right side up. I also had to spare a few leaves when I was cutting them out, so you waste not, want not. I'm definitely keeping those. But all of these now need to dry. Even though the mushrooms, look, they're starting to be secure, I still don't want to colour them until they're properly dry, just to make sure. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that rug dry for a little bit, and I can show you how to dust it later on in the programme. So we need the chair, don't we, for Fryn. Now in order to make the chair strong enough for a character to sit on, even a small character like I'm going to be doing, you need decent support. So I'm going to show you how to do that using wires and florist tape, and we'll make a really nice armature. I also want to show you how to make the seat base, you know, the cushion that he's going to sit on. Now previously we've made grass blades, so I'm going to use that exact same technique again and show you how to do it. To make the seat base, I'm actually going to use the grass method that we used in episode 1. So I've got 26 gauge wires, and these work out roughly, let me get the thick line, they're about 8 or 9 centimetres long on average, and I've used the pre-cut half-width tape. Now it's a nice bright green because it looks quite grassy, and just as we did with the grass, we can dust this as well. So I'm just going to show you how to make one, and then we'll move on to the frame. So the first thing you need to do is to stretch it and stick it to the table. So you can press it down and stick it to the table. So I've got my 9 centimetre piece of 26 gauge wire, and I'm just going to press it down so it's in the middle. Press that down firmly, and then I'm going to overlap my tape so that it's straight. Press it on very gently first to make sure it's straight, and then I tend to press the middle first and then the sides, and then grab the wire and really emphasize it all the way down. Now you do need to lift it up with pliers, with a palette knife, and then you do need to cut the edges off. Now I'm not going to take the extra little bit there because I might wrap around the grass completely, but I'm guessing I'm going to wrap the wires. So there we go, that's the seat. So the next thing we need to do is the actual framework. If you look on the templates, you'll see that I've provided templates for both the rugs. You've got the inner and the outer circle you can line your leaves against. And I've also provided templates for the chair supports. Now I've gone ahead and cut those out, but I'm just going to show you a good way to bend a wire. Okay, so I've got 18 gauge wires. Now the reason for the 18 gauge is because these are going to actually support our figure. Our figure's really going to sit on the chair. So I'm going to hold first. I'm going to push the wire with my thumb so that it bends over. I'm going to hold again where I would like it to bend. Now you can use your template to work out these bending spots. And I'm going to bend down again. And then on a pliers, the little jewellery pliers like this, there's a cutter section. There's also a hollow. So I'm going to use the flat side of the cutter section. Can you hear that tapping against the actual wire itself? Now the reason it's useful is because you can let go and you can grip, and it's not as sharp as a cutting pliers, but it does give that firm cut sound. Now I'm useless at cutting them all the same, so I'm not going to pretend that I'm not. And one of these, the paper started fraying, so I'm going to pop those to one side. I'm just going to show you how to pop these together. So I've written how many wires you need and what sizes. However, excuse the rustling, if you've only got 20 gauge instead of 18, that's fine, use those. You could always stick 2 together, couldn't you? For this bit, I tend to use 28 gauge wires to bind them together. But since you've already used 26 gauge wires, as long as it doesn't hurt your hands, there's no reason why you can't do that. The reason I say about the slightly lighter wires is because I think it's easier for people to bend them. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to make our life a little bit easier. And this is basically the sides and the front of the chair. So what we're going to do, we're going to hold a little bit of 28 gauge wire. We're going to wrap it around quite tightly and try and do it neatly so the lines aren't sort of stacked all over the place. They're neatly in a line and in a row. And then you can pull to the back for both of them and you can cut that off. You'll need a scissors rather than the wire cutters because 28 gauge wires just, they're too light, they're too hard to cut with the big pliers. So that's one piece. Now this isn't tight on there. You can go in with your pliers and you can tighten that off. There we go. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go and do this on fast forward just so you can see me joining all these wires together. When you're going to join the back on, you want to be joining it all together if possible. So that the second piece in there is here. The left and right pieces are there. So there's an upright and there's the cross are there. And can you see this is just loose still? So you could open it back up, but make your life easier and don't have loads and loads and loads of binding points. And what you can do with this method, you can stack them and then tie them tight. Now, the reason I'm not worried is because you can either wrap it in florist tape or you can just go ahead and put the sugar paste on. So all of these legs are basically got to touch the floor. Every single bit that you do is touching the floor. But obviously you can neaten it up as you go along. Now I'm just putting the last upright bar into there. And I wanted it so that it would be narrow at the back and wider at the front, just like a lot of these dining table chairs you see. So that's the wire work done for our armature. Now we need to give it a decent finish. So if you remember in episode 1, when I made my oak branches, I used twig coloured florist tape. So that's what we're going to do for this one. So join me after the break and we'll cover the armature. Welcome back to part 3. So in this section we're going to be covering the armatures with some lovely twig brown florist tape, and we'll also start work on the base. There we are. So I'm just going to let you watch this again on fast forward, and I'm going to start taping over my joins just to neaten it up for you. So as you can see, I've now taped up my little, or wired up I should say, my little chair, and it's not fixed together yet. So this is giving me flexibility to slide bits around. There's going to be posts sticking up at the top, a horizontal, and then this will be where we attach the grass. So you now have 2 design options. One of them is to cover it in flower paste, but the option I'm going to go for today is to actually cover it in the florist tape. So what it'll look like the branches that we used on the oak leaves and on the oak trees earlier, and I think that would look fantastic. So I'm just going to get my brown tape, my twig tape, and I'll do this on fast forward because it takes a little while to tape it together. The final thing we would then be doing would be adding these blades of grass woven across. So this is why we've done them as 26 gauge, because together they'll be strong enough to support Fryn sitting down. So I'm going to go ahead and tape all that together, and I'll leave you watching on fast forward. So I'm going to go ahead and carry on taping this chair, and I'll come back and show you how I've done. So there's our lovely wibbly wobbly chair, and I really do think that that florist tape has changed it. It looks really quite fun, doesn't it? Now obviously we're going to be doing other twigs later on in the season where I actually use paste as the sides, but you can have a go of either. So you can do this obviously as long as you like, can't you? So now the fun part. So I need to do some weaving. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay these across here. I'm going to show you how to start connecting it, and then I'm going to have to just keep going with it. So I'm hoping I can get 4, maybe 5 across there, because I wanted it narrow at the back. I made my life harder, but oh, there we go. 5 will look good, which was the original plan. There we are, look at that. So they're going to be over the back. Now they're going to be slightly overlapped. So I suggest the best way to do that is to attach the middle one first. And my idea is having the wire on the blade of grass on top, because I think it looks more attractive. And we're only going to attach them around the back to start. So I'm going to hold it up, and I'm essentially going to be binding the grass around this back stem. And it doesn't matter if you can see it, because the next one along will cover it a little bit. And it's gone around twice, okay? So you can see how much I've got left over. So now I'm going to add another one on this side. I'm not going to so much overlap this one. More overlapping will be done in the corner. You can also use tweezers. So let me grab a tweezers because it keeps my fingers out of your way. See, wrapping the tweezers tightly around. So this was the 26 gauge wire. This is why I've got a bit of support with this. You could go up to 24 if you want to, but to be honest, the way we're going to make Fryn's armature, it's going to be a lot lighter and a lot less paste than if you didn't use an armature. So that was the reasoning for that. And then on this side, the last one will go in there. Now, again, where are you going to bind that last piece? So I'm going to pull this around and tuck it around the side. I've still got a stool that my mother made, and she wove the top of the stool. There we go. Right, so I'm going to get 2 more now. And this does not have to be perfect because this is done by a member of the fair folk with blades of grass and twigs. So this gives you a little bit of reassurance that perfection is not required today. And I think you've probably noticed that from the way I'm doing all of these bits and pieces, is that I actually like the slightly wiggly wobbly look. It's just more charming, isn't it? Now, just as we did with the twigs in episode 1, so pop along if you haven't seen those. When I was assembling the twigs, I've got lovely twiddles everywhere. So that, I think, finishes it quite nicely, really. Now, we are not attaching it at the end yet. We're not attaching it here. Instead, we're attaching it on this side. Now, what you can do to make your life a little bit easier is stand them up. And you can now attach all of them at the same time. Now that we know, I'm going to put it right in the middle on this one. Now that we know where it's going to be, I'm just really tightly attaching this because obviously it's slightly narrower at the back. So that is going to give us a little bit of extra support, isn't it? And I'm hoping we can get 6 in across the horizontal because that was my, let's see if we can get some support for Fryn's bottom. But like I said, he's not going to be heavy. I did a Roald Dahl piece for Cake International on the Peach Life collaboration, which I was really excited to be part of. And that was made on a bench to represent Central Park in New York, based on the actual benches there, because that's where he used to go and sit and write. And I made that using a wireframe as well, but I used MDF because Roald Dahl, well, the piece was about 11 inches across, so I couldn't risk this big heavy figure. Even with the wire armature, I couldn't risk it falling over. There we are. One more to put in, and then I'm going to do the weaving just with a slightly sped up view. Oh, I'm going to tuck in another one actually. I've got it, so I'm going to use it, but I'm going to leave the neatest one for last because it might be a bit more visible. Can you see that tape has just lost that bit of wire there? So I'm going to make sure the tape is wrapped around the wire so that it can't be seen. Can you see that bit? The little bit of wire there. So don't panic about that. So the last piece is going in before we start the weaving. And as before, it's a bit of a fiddle to get that last twist around, but really make sure you do because you don't want anything collapsing on you. Okay, so we've got some up pieces and some down pieces. So you can take the first one and put it down. Take the second one, first one on the other side and put it down. And it's got to be woven, hasn't it? In and out all the way along. So I'm a bit slow on this, so no laughing, okay? And because it's got wire, you can actually support this as you're working. So I just thought lovely little blades of grass. There you go. How cute is that? and you can move this one up of the way a bit so that you can easily bind that wire on the other side. But by completely covering the grass, you don't have to worry about cutting bits off. If you prefer to cut bits off, that's fine. Very free and easy. So now last time we went over, so this time we need to go under. So you can move all the others out of the way. So we need to go under first. Make sure you're pulling them straight. There we go. Now this one needs to go the other way around. You could give it a bit of a twist. You can tell that I don't weave, can't you? I don't know what possessed me to think this was a good plan. I'll do some weaving that I've never done before. There we are. I think you can see how this lovely pattern is coming already. Perhaps it wasn't such a daft idea. Hey, what do you do if you don't experiment, eh? So last time we went under, so now we're going over. So now I'm going to stop talking and I'm just going to let you watch for a bit so we can speed it up slightly. So for all of you expert weavers, you can show me yours and give me tips. I've nearly finished weaving the base of the chair, so let's take a quick break, and when we come back we'll finish it off and we'll start on the chair back.
I have 3 questions for you. Do you love all things cake? Do you want to learn from some of the world's best cake artists? Do you want to be part of our growing community of over 200,000 members? Then get yourself over to cakeflix.com. We've got some amazing deals on right now. We offer a 365-day support plus the most amazing Q&A service. You can now view us on all the main streaming services. So what are you waiting for? Head over to cakeflix.com now and become part of the Cakeflix family.
So welcome back to the final part. The chair seems to be going really well so far. Don't speak too soon, but I think it's going okay. So let's go and finish it off. So the chair's coming along quite nicely now. So we've got the last few rows to go. You do need to straighten this chair up as you go in as well. And if you feel that the weaving has slid down on one side, as it did on mine, don't be afraid to pull it back up just before you carry on straightening. So now we're on to the final row, and it gets a little bit tricky from here. So I found it a lot easier to turn the chair upside down to fix the last piece underneath. So this is just the front going forwards, not finishing the edge. You can see the little bit of white wire. You can either cover that with a bit of florist tape or you can snip it off. But what I found was just getting that little bit tucked underneath was a lot easier. So in order to finish off the chair, just tuck around the edges as we've done before, and this time all we're going to do is to tuck them underneath and trim them off. So that's our little chair so far, but I do think it would benefit from an extra couple of blades of grass across there. So I'm going to go ahead and add those, and then I shall show you in a minute. So I've made a few more pieces now of the grass. And I'm just trying to decide actually where I would like the back to go, because in my original design I wasn't really thinking of a back. I quite like the idea of the wood, but now all my head is thinking is, oh, poor Fryn, how cruel am I being to him there? So I'm just going to go quite basic with this. I'm going to go around with the first one like that. Okay, so I want that to go across. I want another one to go across. I'm not sure if I want 3 it fills in too much space, doesn't it? Perhaps if we pull her as high as we can, I can get 3 in and still have a gap at the back, because most chairs have a gap at the back, don't they? So that's what I like to do, if possible. So I'm remembering now to put the wire veins that you can see visible on the little chair actually on the front, because it's nicer to see, isn't it? So these are, this time they are 10 centimeters long. Last time they were 8 to 9 centimeters. So I did a little bit extra, not knowing how I was going to complete that design. They shoot everywhere, these wires, don't they? So as we did on the base, and can you spot the mistake there? I'm clearly not going to win any awards with weaving. Oh dear. So apparently even fairies make mistakes. Right, okay, so wrapping around, same as we've done all the way around. So nice and tight. This doesn't need to be strong. So that one's going to stay down and the next one's going to come across, because I think it might give me a bit of a hand, oops, sorry, with the support structure. You can tell how much I'm concentrating on this one, can't you? So in and out as before, and we will work out which ones, watch you don't damage your one at the bottom, which ones can then sit where. But yes, it does look better with a green back to it, doesn't it? So we're going to wrap another one. I'm not going to put a huge number on the back for this. I don't think it's needed. We don't want it gappy though. We want it to look like it belongs. So the other one went behind, so now it's got to go in front. So we're still doing the in front, behind, in front, behind. So I'm going to add in, can I squeeze 2 more in? We'll have a go, eh? There we go. So just finishing off the in and out bit. And then I'm going to tuck them around the back for some of them. And the others are actually just going to get snipped. So that one's going to go behind. So I'm just wrapping these around. So we're just finishing off the back now, and I really need to wrap this bit tight around. Any bits that I'm not happy with or that are sticking out, such as the bit on the back, I can just trim away now, and especially trim the bottom of the chair back just to neaten that as well. You can see the little bit of florist wire there. I'm actually going to add a piece of tape over that just to neaten it. So for a first ever bit of weaving, I think that will do. There we go. So that is our chair. There we go. Give it a good shaping. You can see it sits down quite nicely all on its own, and it's got the lovely tendrils that we wanted everywhere else as well. So ignoring the little mistakes here and there, I'm really quite happy with that as a first go. If I was doing it for a competition, obviously I'd keep going, but you need some element of charm still if it's going to be fairies. The thing I would have done is replace that piece and rewoven that bit. There we go. So that's our chair.
So there you go, it worked. Right, so what we need to do now, we need to get everything dusted up. So even though the chair's only florist tape, you can still add some dust to that as well. And don't forget, we've got our rug, we've got our mushrooms, and we've got our little stones to do. So let's get on with those.
So here we're looking at my stones now, and I think I'm quite happy with those as a rule. But if you feel one looks a little bit too shiny, maybe this one, for example, looks a little bit too bright, you could get a little bit of the black. This is the Fun Dustic black, and just catch the edges to stop it looking too plasticky. There we are. Can you see that's quite a difference on there? You can also use the brown, whether you want to choose milk chocolate or dark chocolate for a lighter or a darker shade. If you feel that it looks a little bit too black and white, I tend to grab the browns on there. The other thing I tend to do with my pebbles is to give them a bit of a spray. So do you remember in previous episode we sprayed it, didn't we? We used the FMM, and I also used the Cake Star. So any of the edible spray shines, but not too much a shell and shine, because you don't want it that dark. That shiny, sorry. There we are, see?
So that looks a lot better. And when you give it a spray, as always, give it a really good shake before you start. There we are. That does look better. That one's upside down. Because stones would have an element of shine to them, we can add the depth later on by adding some dust over at the end, but that's when we complete the scene. So that's the stones. With the mushrooms, now these come in lots of different colours, so you can have a really lovely time doing these. I'm going to start off with a little bit of squirrel brown, and some of the ones that I saw when I was doing my research had really lovely chestnutty stems, so the squirrel brown is perfect for that. And where you're brushing against the texture, it really brings it up nicely. And again, I'll spray that later on as well. So that's all I'm going to do to the stems. I'm also going to do what I call the dab, dab, dab on the top, because I don't want it too solid in any one place. Now make sure when you're doing this to your unwired ones, or unskewered ones, shall we say, that you don't actually do it too hard, because you might spoil it really. I'm also going to come up the sides a little bit. So this is what I call my scruffy brush. So you need a brush that you've pretty much destroyed and you don't care about stabbing, because it just gives you a really nice effect then with that. So it's a bit scruffy, but not quite scruffy enough. So that was the squirrel brown. Now I'm going to add a little bit of the dark chocolate in. Again, still in the stab, stab, stab. But I can use the edge of my brush a bit more to direct the stab in and to go in certain places. So say, for example, you can see you've made a split on there. You want to make sure, can you see I've now highlighted that split by going across it, which is brilliant. That's just what I was hoping for. You can also use it to go inside the holes. So you're going to need, you're going to need a more detailed brush to get inside. And I'm still dusting at the moment. I'm not painting, because I want to be able to choose my depth of colour. There we are. You can see it's going in, again, catching inside these bigger splits that we've done. Really giving it a good bit of depth in there. And then I'm going to use another of my scruffy brushes, and I'm going to go in with the milk chocolate just to come in around the edges again. So it's a little bit different to the squirrel brown. Now you could mix your squirrel brown with your dark chocolate, or you could mix your milk chocolate with your dark chocolate. So if you want middling shades, don't fear, it's easy to get those. And the reason I'm dusting is because I want to be able to control the amount of colour as well. So I'm using now a mixture of milk chocolate and dark chocolate. And I'm going to do what I call a little swipe around the edge with my scruffy brush, because I don't want this to be perfect. I need it a little bit scruffy, but I also need it a little bit definite as well. So some of the mushrooms have got them, some of them haven't. There we are. So you've got that lovely rim around the outside. I'm just going to go in a bit deeper on the top. And of course, if you've got any excess colour, remember to blow it away. And I'm also going to go in inside with that dark brown as well. And every now and again, I'm going to catch some of the stem just to stop it looking too samey all the way around. There we go. Leave the gills underneath nice and white. You don't want those changing colour. So the lovely mix of the milk chocolate and dark chocolate really gets that colour shade that I want, because every now and again there'll be a ring on the mushroom. So you get like a fairy ring on a fairy ring. And I'm also going to put a tiny bit out on the top. Again, just stab, stab, stab. There we are. That looks far more realistic, doesn't it? As our nice little mushrooms to grow in the garden. I am going to give it an ever such a slight spray on the top, but I'm going to go from quite a distance. There we go. So that gives you the slightly silky appearance to the mushroom without actually getting a shine. So there we go, that's the mushrooms. So we're going to go ahead and dust the rest of those. So I've just sprayed these mushrooms now after dusting them, and as you can see, this is the very first one. So I've used different amounts of the squirrel brown, the milk chocolate and the dark chocolate mixed together. In some places I've even caught a little bit of black here and there, just to try and get it to get a bit of variety. There we are, see, just leave them there. So it's just nice to have some different colours on the top, because that's what they tend to do anyway. So let's move these on to one side now and then let them dry. So I've just moved them to one side, and don't forget that shininess will disappear. Now we're going to move on to all of the green stuff basically. So if you remember when we dusted our fern, it's a very similar way to when we dusted the oak leaves as well. You do need that little bit of yellow in here and there, but because this is such a small piece, I'm going to use small brushes as well. So I've got that small brush that I used earlier, and the same as when I dusted the ferns in episode 1, I've got two different brushes, one with yellow and one with green. So I'm going to go in with the yellow first, and just on the edge every now and again I'm going to catch some yellow. And if you see that happening, make sure you don't try and blow it with anything other than well, this is a photographer's camera lens cleaner. Couldn't get the words there. Now I'm not going to do every single leaf with this method. And I can also do these with the unwired leaves as well. So next I'm going to go up onto this citrus green, which was the lovely bright colour that we used as well. So it's quite a limey green. And I am now doing this on all of them, because I want these to be freshly picked leaves, but they're going to be worn down with a little bit of dust and dirt and age. And I'm using quite a wide brush because I want to be able to pick up some of the veins. So you can brush some slightly sideways, some the right way, just to pick up oddments of depth here and there. I'm not even going to be brushing these off before I go any further. I'll just change colours, because what will happen is all these colours will now really nicely start to blend together. So that was the citrus green. So less colour on the brush this time. And now I'm still going to go slightly against every leaf. Now what happens, do you remember when we did the fern in episode 1? It goes darker when it's sprayed. Now I don't really want to be standing this up in order to be able to use a steamer on it. I have got a tabletop steamer, which is quite clever because you can angle it, but I think the best bet for this is to spray it, because it will protect all of these colours. Can you see the edges are catching as well? So I'm just going to go ahead and dust this just so you can watch. So I'm going against the shape of the veining all the way through and catching the edges as well. And the last thing I would catch the edges with is a little bit of the squirrel brown every now and again to make little patches stick out. Even along the insides, just here and there, just to stop it being too, well, samey. There we are. And just catching the edges and barely touching it at all. Now with this, I'm going to use the grass green again because that's absolutely the perfect colour. I'm just going to make sure I've got it in there. And I'm going to just brush across where a vein goes. So if it goes that way, you must brush that way. See my mistake even more now, can't you? So I'll just keep doing that to camera. So across that way or across horizontal. So you make sure you follow the shape of the vein. So I'll just carry on dusting these and then we'll come back. So as you can see now, I'm getting some areas slightly darker than others. Obviously we started with a different colour with the grass stems, so that's not going to work out the same for the oak. We want to keep that quite cute. I don't want it to be too dark because I want it to look rather attractive. Just making sure some areas are dark. And then if you're happy with the depth, which I am, I think, you can go ahead and spray. So let's move these out of the way. There we go, just so you can see it. And I'll also spray that leaf as well. So watch the difference in colour now. So can you see how much darker that's gone? And I've got those lovely patches on there as well. So this is the reason I didn't want to go darker straight away, because I wanted it to be bright and pretty. So now I've sprayed my my mat, my rug. I can come back in now and just catch every now and again if you want it to be a little bit darker. So this is even after the spray, because at the moment when I'm dusting it, that spray, where it's slightly damp, is catching onto that colour really nicely. So I'm just going to pull some brown onto the edges. This is the dark chocolate, sorry, the milk chocolate. So I've got some of the squirrel brown in very lightly, and now this is some of the milk chocolate as well. And I'm going back and forth between the milk chocolate and the grass green, and then just give it one last spray. There we go. So that's our rug finished. So here's the chair. Now you can decide whether you want to spray the grass or not, but that actually gives it quite a nice appearance, doesn't it? Make sure you do the back and make sure you do underneath as well, just because grassy blades might be shiny. So I think that just looks quite sweet. There we go. So there we go. That's all our bits and pieces made now, ready for furnishing the Cwtch. We won't need them yet, so I'm going to store these in a cardboard box with a lid. If you haven't got a dehumidifier in your cake room, then you can pop a little ramekin of salt inside the cardboard box, and that'll draw the moisture away from your sugar pieces. So you can see the colour is starting to settle now as the shine is disappearing off the spray, especially on the leaves. We've got some lovely dirty patches now, and we've got the mixtures of colours on the stones. So all of the colours you need are on your equipment list as always, but don't forget you can mix and match with whatever colours are in your toolbox.
Thank you so much for your company this evening here on Cakeflix TV. My name's Rhianydd Webb, and this is Woodland and Whimsical Cake Art. On the next episode on the 22nd of July, which is still a Wednesday, still 9 PM UK time, and still on Cakeflix TV, we will be moving on from our cute little chairs, although I want one, and we will be making a slice of nature, which means we're going to be referring to my book Cyril's Cake Adventures and creating a delicious chocolate biscuit cake and turning it into that tree trunk slice to go at the bottom. So any further information, or if you'd like information on where to buy my products or book on my classes, go to the website on the link below, and otherwise I'll see you on the 22nd. Happy caking!